Maigad a chean cóirle agus ní doubt bína go bhfuil tuismitheoirí agus cuirimí a ligean síos ag an rialta seo agus ní féidir thart ar seirbhísí faoi siú dá leanaí agus dá rialta aniu tuigiimiid gur rialtaí an feidhmeanna seirbhís leinte dá thógra an ára Respite de leaba faoi siú a ascailt dá leanaí faoi mú chumas i gcondaí Harcaí bolle eile dá thuismitheoirí agus dá Hailí. Tánaiste, on RTE News this weekend we learned about Julianne Cuneen from Upper Glanmire in Cork and her 16-year-old son Liam. Now, Liam is a pupil at Carrigaline Community Special School and the family are at the point of breaking. They're put to the pin of their collar because they can't access overnight respite services. Julianne told RTE that she rates her pain between 8 and 9 on a scale of 1 to 10. She told RTE that Liam's pain is about a 7 or 8. And Julianne tells us that she has never had access to overnight respite services in all of the 16 years that Liam has been on this earth. She has asked time and time again of the HSE for it, asked regularly, but she said she never got it. And that is an utterly unacceptable situation for that family to be treated. But it isn't unique, and that's the problem. This is a massive issue in Cork, but it is also a problem for patients and for families right across the state. In my own county of Donegal, parents are forced to go on the local radio to express their outrage and concerns at respite services being suspended at Drumboe Respite House in Stranorlar for over 3 years. In Wexford, parents and carers and those supporting them staged a protest down Gorey Main Street this week following the news that respite services are being withdrawn in St Aidan's at Mulcahy House for the next 3 months. These parents describe themselves as desperate, isolated, exhausted following the announcement. And they're not alone. For parents and caregivers right across the state, whether they're in Donegal or in Wexford or in your own county of Cork, these respite services are not a luxury, they are absolutely critical. They often provide the only opportunity for these families to attend a family wedding, to attend the funeral of a loved one, or simply to recharge. The disruption caused by respite services being withdrawn, being cancelled or closed cannot be overstated, Taoiseach, and it's happening on your watch. So, with uncertainty for parents and for caregivers who are given little warning when services are closed and little clarity of when they will reopen. Taoiseach, as it relates to Carrigaline Community Special School, families with children at that school say that they cannot even get onto the waiting list for overnight respite because the school the children are attending is not operated by what they call a traditional disability service provider. Now, that is a farcical state of affairs and it's gone on for far too long. The HSE this morning, we hear, have rejected the proposal from Anne Rabbitte, the Minister, to reopen 10 beds for children with disabilities in Cork. And that's ridiculous that these services are not being fully staffed by the HSE in the first place. But for the HSE now to come and dismiss the Minister's proposal out of hand is simply embarrassing. And in the middle of all of this here, there are children and families and parents desperate for respite service. Julianne, who hasn't got one night overnight respite in 16 years. So, Taoiseach, do you accept that children, that adults, that families are being failed and failed again by your government because of the lack of services across the state? How do you stand by the fact that as we speak here, there are 10 empty beds in your county of Cork for respite services that are not operational? There are 12 in County Wexford that are closed for the next 3 months that are not operational. For 3 years, there is a respite centre that hasn't operated in my own county in Donegal. Surely this is an example of a government that is failing to plan. So what comfort, what assurance, what are you going to do as Taoiseach to make sure that these families are no longer failing for the state and that these families get the support that they desperately need?
Well, ein tim go vil gear on fuisih for hort the taglig agus go hair the lanie tá gan fuisih to hiochte go haire lanie le gan specialte agus tá mig den of gaki an iracht na shirshi chur fáil ní ceist áisina an seo ní ceist takeíoch tan háisina antan argadón ach cétá in asnamh nó na fearne a chuir fáil agus daoine a bheith isteach sna seirbhísí chun obair sna ionad fuaisibh seo. Could I say at the outset that I'm fully aware of the situation in respect of, obviously, the Carrigaline Special School in Cork, but indeed respite services across the country. I would have met with the parents of Carrigaline Special School, which is a recently established school, the first of its kind under the ETB, under the Educational Training Board in the Cork area, established over the last 2 years now, given an absence. And we did move, and I was involved in asking the ETB to come into the scene to provide special education. And I think that, along with the traditional providers, is something that we should welcome. However, there can be no situation where, because of school patronage should not determine the availability of respite for any child. All providers have service level contracts with the HSE. Those service level contracts do not, in my view, differentiate, or in no way should be used to say that because you go to one particular school you can't avail of respite services that are provided by a provider. The children in a given area, disability area, or for the purposes of providing services, must be treated equally. And the HSE have confirmed that to me, that that is the case. And it can't be about just traditional practice. And that would be a concern I have, having met the parents, that it's their view, because they are attending an ETB school, that they don't have access to respite services provided by traditional providers. Now, the HSE are and will meet with all providers to make sure that that is not the case into the future. That is not the government's position. There are, as you say, services suspended, or there's 10 beds not operational because of staffing issues. But my understanding, the HSE have not rejected the Minister's proposal that a combination of permanent staff along with agency staff would be used to operationalise those beds. And I do believe that the local HSE are working to try and create alternatives or models to see if we can operationalise those beds or provide respite to children in the area. And likewise across the country, it's not a question of funding. The capital is there and will be there to provide additional respite facilities for children, but in addition to therapies as well, but also utilising other forms of provision to attend to the needs and provide for the needs of children with special needs. I understand the anxiety of the parents involved. Many of those parents had anxiety 2 years ago about getting school places. We worked at the time through education and with the NCSE, the National Council for Special Education, to establish new schools. We're working in terms of making sure that there's an adequacy of therapy provision. And if one form doesn't work in terms of the traditional way of recruiting therapists, we're going to have to look at other ways of recruiting therapists and through different approaches. Because, as far as I'm concerned, we have to look after the child and we have to look after the families. That should be uppermost in all our concerns, and that it is in mine and in the government's as well.
Taoiseach, with respect, you're not looking after the child. You're not looking after the family. Julianne went on national radio and said for 16 years she hasn't had one night of overnight respite. She puts her pain levels between 8 and 9 and her son's between 7 and 8. She's been failed over and over again. How can you say that you're looking after the child, looking after the family in that scenario? How do you say that to the people who took to the street in Wexford? Their services was withdrawn from them with little notice. Respite's gone in that area for 3 months. How do you tell the mother who comes to me in Donegal, where Drumbo Respite Centre is not available to her 2 children with special needs for the last 3 years, despite me raising it on this floor many, many times, including back 2 years ago, told that it's in hand, it was going to be reopened. Last year it was going to be reopened. Earlier last month I was told it's going to be the end of the year before it's reopened. These children are being failed over and over and over again, and it is down to a failure to plan, to ensure that the workforce is there, that the capacity is there, and the facilities are there. And can I say this, Taoiseach? With respect, these are some of the most vulnerable children and adults in the state.
Thank you, Deputy.
And I ask you, what are you going to do to ensure that the 10 empty beds in Cork are reopened, that the 12 empty beds in Wexford are reopened, and that the centre in Donegal is providing respite centre for children and adults there?